My name is Priscilla, and at 34 years old, I was sitting in my Manhattan penthouse office watching my family's group chat explode with messages about poor Priscilla. My mother had just posted in our family Facebook group asking everyone to pray for her struggling daughter. Meanwhile, I was reviewing acquisition papers for my third company this quarter. The irony was suffocating. My family was planning an intervention for my failure, while I quietly ran a billion-dollar empire they knew nothing about. Before I share how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from. And please subscribe if you've ever felt misunderstood by your family. Your support means everything. As I tell this story, the Harrison family of Westport, Connecticut was everything you'd expect from old money suburbia. My father, Richard Harrison, had retired as a senior executive from Chase Bank 3 years ago. He measured success in corner offices' corporate titles and year-end bonuses. Every conversation with him inevitably circled back to organizational charts and who reported to whom. He kept a mental scorecard of every person's professional status, and nothing existed outside the corporate hierarchy in his worldview. My mother, Dorothy Harrison, was the quintessential country club socialite. She spent her afternoons at the Westport Country Club, where comparing children's achievements was an Olympic sport. She knew every detail about every member's offspring. The Whitman boy just made partner at his law firm. The Chen girl was now chief resident at Johns Hopkins. These updates were delivered at our dinner table like battle reports from the front lines of parental competition. Then there was Marcus, my older brother by 5 years. Marcus was everything our parents had dreamed of in a child. He'd gone to Yale just like father. He'd joined Goldman Sachs straight out of college, just like father had hoped. Now at 39, he was a managing director in their mergers and acquisitions division. His bonus last year was $2 million a fact. My mother managed to work into every conversation, including once with a grocery store cashier. My sister Jennifer, 2 years older than me, had taken the other acceptable path. She'd married Thomas, a cardiothoracic surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital. They lived in a 6-bedroom colonial with their 3 children. Jennifer drove a white Range Rover, volunteered at the right charities, and posted perfect family photos on Instagram every Sunday. She was living the Connecticut dream, and my mother's friends constantly praised her for raising such an accomplished daughter. And then there was me, Priscilla, the baby of the family who never quite fit the mold. From childhood, I was different. While Marcus was joining Model UN and Jennifer was perfecting her tennis serve, I was taking apart computers in my bedroom. I taught myself to code at 12 using library books and free online tutorials. My parents found it concerning. Nice girls didn't spend Saturday nights debugging JavaScript. They went to cotillion classes and learned to make proper small talk. Family dinners in the Harrison household were performance reviews disguised as meals. We'd sit around the mahogany dining table, while each child reported their achievements. Marcus would discuss his deals. Jennifer would share her husband's latest surgical triumph, or her children's academic awards. When it came to my turn, my interests in building websites or creating apps were met with polite confusion, at best dismissive concern at worst. College was where the divide truly began. I chose computer science at MIT, which should have impressed them. But to my parents, it wasn't Harvard Law or Yale Medicine. It was playing with computers. My father actually used those words at his golf club. I heard him through a friend whose father was a member. Richard Harrison's youngest was playing with computers instead of pursuing a real career. My first job after graduation was at a startup in San Francisco. The company was building revolutionary logistics software, and I was employee number 7. My parents were horrified. Where was the stability, the prestige? The corporate ladder to climb Marcus had started at Goldman with a class of 200 analysts. Jennifer had married Thomas by then, who was already established at the hospital. I was sharing a cramped apartment in the Mission District, working 18-hour days for equity that might never be worth anything. That Thanksgiving changed everything for me. I'd come home exhausted, but excited about our first major client. Before I could share the news, my mother had already started her performance. She'd invited the extended family, and throughout dinner, she kept making these small cutting remarks. Poor Priscilla is still finding herself. She's exploring her options. She'll settle down eventually. My aunt offered me a receptionist position at her husband's dental practice. My uncle suggested I might want to consider getting my real estate license, something stable. I sat at that table 26 years old, watching my family plan my life because they decided I was incapable of planning it myself. Jennifer's husband kept giving me these pitying looks. Marcus actually slipped me $300 when he hugged me goodbye, whispering that I shouldn't be too proud to ask for help. That night, I made a decision that would define the next 8 years of my life. I would never again share my successes with my family. They'd made up their minds about who I was, and nothing I said would change that. If they wanted to see me as the family failure, I'd let them. The next month, that first client signed a contract worth $10 million over 3 years. I was promoted to lead developer and given a significant equity boost. I celebrated alone in my apartment with a bottle of champagne and Chinese takeout. My mother called that same night to tell me about Marcus's promotion and to ask again if I was eating enough. She worried about me, she said. Life was so hard without direction. I told her I was doing fine. Just fine. Those two words became my shield for everything that followed. How was work? Just fine. How was I managing financially? Just fine. Was I dating anyone? No, but I was fine. The startup was acquired 18 months later for $40 million. My equity payout was $3 million after taxes. I put it all into my own company, working nights and weekends, while still maintaining my day job. My family thought I was struggling to make ends meet. In reality, I was building the foundation of an empire. But the lying was harder than I'd anticipated. Every family gathering required careful preparation. I kept my old Honda Civic from college, even though I could afford a Tesla. I maintained a small studio apartment in a modest building for family visits, while actually living in a luxury high-rise. I created an entire fictional life to maintain their narrative. The emotional toll was something I hadn't calculated. There were nights I'd stare at my phone, Marcus's contact pulled up, wanting to tell him about the contract I'd just closed or the team I was building. But then I'd remember him at that Thanksgiving counting out those $300 like I was a charity case. I'd remember my mother's voice dripping with false concern telling her bridge club about her youngest daughter, who just couldn't seem to find her way. So I stayed quiet. And in that silence, I built something extraordinary. 5 years ago, everything accelerated in ways I never could have imagined. My AI-powered logistics platform Neural Flow had started as a side project in my cramped studio apartment. I was solving a problem I'd identified at my first startup: the inefficiencies in supply chain management that cost companies millions annually. What began as a few thousand lines of code became a revolutionary system that could predict and prevent distribution bottlenecks with 97% accuracy. The night I signed my first enterprise client, a Fortune 500 retailer, I was sitting on my floor eating instant ramen. The contract was worth $10 million. I remember staring at the signature page, my hand shaking slightly as I docu-signed it. My phone buzzed with a family group text. Jennifer was sharing professional photos from her daughter's third birthday party at the country club. My mother responded immediately, gushing about how perfect everything looked. Nobody asked about my day. Building a company while maintaining a facade of failure required incredible mental gymnastics. I hired my first employees, brilliant engineers from Google and Amazon, while telling my family I was doing freelance work to make ends meet. When my mother asked about health insurance, I told her I'd figured something out through the marketplace. She spent 40 minutes lecturing me about financial responsibility, while I was negotiating a $50 million Series A funding round. The pandemic became my unexpected catalyst. While the world shut down, demand for supply chain optimization exploded. Companies that had ignored digital transformation were suddenly desperate. Neuralflow's revenue grew 800% in 18 months. I hired 50 employees, all remote, which made hiding easier. My family assumed I was unemployed and living off savings. My father sent me links to job postings at banks, entry-level positions. The acquisition offers started coming in year 2. Amazon's venture arm, Microsoft, Oracle. The numbers were staggering. The first offer was for $200 million. I turned it down. My board thought I was insane. My family thought I was depressed because I'd started seeing a therapist. If only they knew I was processing the stress of running a company valued at $500 million. By year 3, I'd launched my second company, a fintech platform called PayFlow that integrated with NeuralFlow to handle complex international transactions. The banking relationships I needed were ironically similar to the ones my father had spent his career building, but I couldn't ask for his advice or connections. I built everything from scratch, cold calling, grinding, proving myself repeatedly in rooms full of men who looked like him. I moved to a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, but kept the studio in Queens for family visits. The penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The studio had a radiator that clanged all night. When my mother visited, she'd bring groceries, worried I couldn't afford food. I'd accept them gracefully, then donate everything to the food bank downtown. Creating cover stories became an elaborate art. I invented a boss named Sophie, who was demanding but fair. When family asked about work, Sophie was building her company and I was helping her. Sophie was the one traveling to conferences, not me. Sophie was the successful one. I was just her employee, grateful for the opportunity to learn. The emotional weight of deception grew heavier with each milestone. When NeuralFlow's valuation crossed 100 million, I was featured in TechCrunch. My PR team managed to keep my photo out of it using only the company logo. When my brother sent the article to our family group chat commenting that this was the kind of innovation happening in tech, I had to bite my tongue until it bled. He had no idea he was praising his failure sister's work. Dating became impossible. How do you build a genuine relationship when your entire family life is a lie? I went on dates where I'd have to pretend to be struggling financially because what if they knew someone who knew my family? One man, a perfectly nice investment banker, offered to pay for my coffee because he assumed I couldn't afford it. I let him, then went home and cried into my Egyptian cotton sheets. My employees didn't understand why I never mentioned family at company events. They'd share stories about their parents' pride, their siblings' excitement about the company's growth. I'd smile and change the subject. My head of engineering once asked if my family would attend our IPO ceremony. I told her they lived far away. Connecticut is an hour from Manhattan by train. The second company's growth was even more explosive. Payflow caught the attention of major banks who wanted to partner rather than compete. Strategic partnerships with JP Morgan Bank of America Wells Fargo. The irony that I was working with my father's former colleagues wasn't lost on me. Some of them probably knew him. But Priscilla Harrison, CEO of Payflow, couldn't be Richard Harrison's disappointing daughter. That girl was a freelancer struggling to find her way. My third company launched quietly 18 months ago. MedFlow applied our optimization technology to healthcare logistics, reducing medication delivery times to critical care units by 60%. Hospitals across the country began implementation. We saved lives, actual human lives, and my family still thought I needed their pity. The night my net worth crossed 500 million, I sat alone in my penthouse looking at the city lights. My phone showed 17 unread messages in the family group chat. They were planning Jennifer's anniversary party. My mother had assigned me the task of bringing paper plates and plastic forks because it was affordable, and I wouldn't feel bad about contributing. I RSVP'd yes and ordered Chine plates in bulk. Building an empire in secret is profoundly lonely. Every achievement is celebrated in isolation. Every milestone is marked alone. But there was something else too, a kind of freedom. Without my family's expectations and judgments, I could build exactly what I envisioned. No one was telling me to be more careful, to think smaller, to be realistic. When Forbes called about including me in their self-made women list, I declined. When Bloomberg wanted a profile, I passed. I became known in tech circles as the mysterious CEO who never did press. The speculation about my reclusiveness added to my mystique helped in negotiations. If only they knew it was all to hide from my mother's bridge club. The closest call came when Marcus attended a Goldman Sachs tech conference, where I was the keynote speaker. I saw his name on the attendee list an hour before my talk. I claimed food poisoning and had my CTO deliver the presentation. Marcus texted the family group that night raving about the brilliant presentation he'd seen from NeuralFlow's CTO. If only the CEO had shown up, he said he'd have loved to meet her. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji and went back to reviewing acquisition offers for my fourth company. Last Christmas was the breaking point. I'd flown in from closing a $100 million partnership in Tokyo, landing at JFK at 3 in the morning. By noon, I was sitting in my childhood home watching my family perform their annual achievement review. Marcus had just been promoted to managing director, the youngest in his division's history. My parents opened champagne, real champagne, the kind they save for actual celebrations. My father gave a speech about carrying on the Harrison legacy of excellence. Marcus sat there beaming, absorbing their pride like photosynthesis. He'd bought a house in Greenwich, 8-bedroom swimming pool, the whole suburban dream package. My mother had already been there 3 times to help his wife decorate. Jennifer and Thomas announced they'd bought a vacation home in the Hamptons. Nothing crazy, Jennifer said with false modesty. Just a little beach cottage. The cottage had 6 bedrooms and ocean views. They'd already planned which weeks each family member could visit. I was given a week in September after the season ended, when rental prices dropped. The extended family arrived for dinner. Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, still ran her grocery store in town. She'd done well for herself, 3 locations now. She took one look at me and shook her head, that pitying shake that said everything without words. After dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Priscilla, honey," she said, "you can't drift forever. I have an opening at the Westport store. Assistant manager. The pay isn't much, but it's steady. You'd get benefits. Structure. You need structure in your life." I was running 3 companies with a combined valuation of $800 million. I thanked her and said I'd think about it. Cousin Brad, who'd failed upward into a middle management position at an insurance company, pulled me aside next. He had a friend, he said. A nice guy, divorced but stable, an accountant. Maybe not the most exciting career, but reliable. At my age, he added, I couldn't be too picky. The good ones were mostly taken. I spent 4 hours at that gathering, being systematically diminished by people who claimed to love me. My mother had prepared a special plate for me, smaller portions, because she knew money was tight. My father kept steering conversations away from career talk when I was in the room, protecting my feelings. Jennifer's kids were told to thank Aunt Priscilla for her gifts, even though they were obviously less expensive than everyone else's. The gifts were actually from Bergdorf Goodman, but I'd removed the tags and rewrapped them in discount store paper. The drive back to the city that night was brutal. I pulled over twice to cry. Not delicate tears, but body-shaking sobs that left me gasping. The kind of crying that makes your chest hurt and your eyes swell. I sat in my Tesla, which my family didn't know existed, screaming at the steering wheel. 8 years of this. 8 years of being their cautionary tale. My therapist, Dr. Winters, had been seeing me for 3 years. She was the only person who knew the full truth. Our sessions had evolved from managing imposter syndrome to processing the complex trauma of voluntary invisibility. She called it achievement isolation, the unique pain of success that can't be shared with those who should celebrate it most. The physical manifestations had started 2 years ago. Insomnia that no amount of Ambien could touch. Anxiety attacks during family dinners that I had to hide in bathroom breaks. I developed a tremor in my left hand that appeared specifically when my mother called. My body was rejecting the lie, even as my mind insisted on maintaining it. Work became my escape and my prison. I threw myself into 18-hour days not because the companies needed it, but because work was the only place I could be myself. My employees saw the real Priscilla, confident, decisive visionary. The moment I left the office, I had to shrink back into the family failure, the one who couldn't quite figure life out. Dating had become impossible. I'd tried being honest with one man, telling him about the companies after 3 months of dating. He couldn't understand why I'd lie to my family. He said it seemed manipulative, cruel even. We broke up 2 weeks later. After that, I stopped trying. How could I explain that sometimes love comes with so many conditions that success itself becomes a betrayal? My employees noticed the walls. They'd invite me to dinner after big wins, and I'd always have an excuse. They learned not to ask about holidays or family visits. My head of operations once joked that I was like Batman, mysterious backstory and all. If only she knew how accurate that was. The friendship dynamics were equally complicated. I had 2 sets of friends, those who knew my success and those who knew my family. The groups could never meet. I planned social events with military precision to avoid overlap. When successful friends asked about my family, I was vague. When childhood friends visited my studio apartment, I hid any evidence of wealth. I once spent 3 hours removing all designer labels from my clothes before a college reunion. Charity became my outlet for the wealth I couldn't acknowledge. Anonymous donations to MIT's computer science program. Anonymous funding for girls' coding camps. Anonymous sponsorship of startup incubators in underserved communities. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing to causes I cared about, all untraceable to me. The tax benefits were nice, but really I just needed the money to mean something since I couldn't share its existence. The near misses kept getting closer. Marcus had a friend at Forbes who mentioned they were investigating the mysterious CEO of Neural Flow. Jennifer's husband's hospital had just signed a contract with MedFlow. My father's former colleague was on the board of one of my venture capital partners. The world was getting smaller as my empire grew larger. One evening, I was at a charity gala, the kind where a seat costs more than most people's annual salary. I was there representing my companies, making connections, being the CEO everyone wanted to meet. Across the room, I saw a familiar figure. My mother's best friend from the country club. Our eyes met. She looked confused, like she recognized me but couldn't place from where. I excused myself, claimed illness, and fled through the service entrance. That night, I sat in my penthouse looking at my family's group chat. They were discussing my birthday coming up in 3 months. My mother wanted to take me shopping at Target, help me find some professional clothes for job interviews. Jennifer suggested a makeover. Maybe if I looked more polished, I'd feel more confident. Marcus offered to review my resume, help me punch it up. They were planning an intervention, a full family intervention for my 35th birthday. They'd each prepared talking points about getting my life together. 5 years from 40, my mother had written in a text. She probably thought I couldn't see in the thread. Time was running out for me to make something of myself. I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Winters. I couldn't breathe. The walls of my penthouse felt like they were closing in. She prescribed Xanax for the panic attacks and suggested gently that maybe it was time to tell the truth. But the truth felt impossible. 8 years of lies. 8 years of letting them believe I was a failure. 8 years of their pity and condescension. How do you unravel that? How do you explain that their disappointment gave you the freedom to build something extraordinary? How do you tell your family that their love felt so conditional? You had to become a billionaire in secret just to prove you could. The stress was killing me, literally. My doctor found 3 ulcers during a routine endoscopy. My blood pressure was concerning for someone my age. I was grinding my teeth so hard at night that I'd cracked 2 molars. Success without acknowledgement is a special kind of poison. It fills you up and empties you out simultaneously. But change was coming whether I wanted it or not. The IPO was scheduled. The media campaign was planned. The secret I'd guarded for 8 years was about to explode across every financial newspaper in the world. The question wasn't if my family would find out anymore. It was how. 3 months before everything changed, I sat in a boardroom on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, surrounded by investment bankers from Morgan Stanley. They were walking through the IPO timeline for Neural Flow. The valuation had stabilized at $1.2 billion. We'd go public in 12 weeks. Ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. My face would be on every financial news channel in America. The lead banker, Harrison Mills, no relation, thankfully pulled up a PowerPoint slide showing the media strategy. CNBC exclusive, Wall Street Journal profile, Forbes cover story, Bloomberg television interview, TechCrunch feature. They wanted to play up the angle of the mysterious female CEO finally stepping into the spotlight, the youngest self-made female billionaire in tech logistics. It was a publicist's dream story. I stared at the timeline, feeling my chest tighten. Week 1 would be the SEC filing, which would include my full name and background. Week 2 would begin the media rollout. By week 3, my face would be everywhere. There was no version of this where my family didn't find out. My phone buzzed with a family group text. My mother was sharing an article about young professionals returning to graduate school after failing in their careers. She'd added thought this might be helpful for Priscilla. Options are good. Marcus had hearted the message. Jennifer added that her friend's sister had gone back for her MBA at 35 and completely turned her life around. The irony was suffocating. I was about to take a company public while they were researching graduate programs for failures. The family group chat had become increasingly toxic over the past month. My approaching 35th birthday seemed to trigger something in them. The messages came daily now: job listings from my father, dating app recommendations from Jennifer, financial planning seminars from Marcus. They were scrambling to save me from a future they'd imagined, not knowing I'd already built one beyond their wildest dreams. My mother had created a separate chat with just her and my siblings to plan the intervention. I wasn't supposed to know, but Jennifer had accidentally included me before quickly removing me. I'd seen enough. They'd each been assigned topics. Marcus would handle financial planning, Jennifer would cover personal presentation and dating, my parents would address career goals and moving back home temporarily to save money. Moving back home. They wanted me to move back into my childhood bedroom to save money while I figured my life out. I owned a penthouse worth $12 million, and they wanted me to move back home. The PR team at Neural Flow had started their preparatory work. They needed photos, biographical information, personal anecdotes for the profiles. Every question felt like a landmine. Where did you grow up? What did your parents think of your career choice? Who supported you in the early days? I gave vague answers, redirecting to the company's mission whenever possible. Sarah Chen, my head of communications, noticed my reluctance. CEOs usually love this part, she said. The victory lap. The chance to tell their story. She asked if there was something I wanted to keep private. I told her my family valued their privacy. She nodded, making a note to keep family mentions minimal. If only she knew the truth. 2 months before IPO, the lawyers needed emergency contact information. Standard procedure. I listed my attorney instead of family. The lawyer looked confused. No spouse, no parents, no siblings. I told him my attorney had power of attorney. He'd never seen that before for someone so young with living relatives. I paid him enough not to ask more questions. The company celebration planning had begun. Every employee would receive equity worth real money once we went public. Lives would change. College funds created. Mortgages paid off. First homes purchased. They wanted to invite their families to the NYSE for the bell ringing. Of course, I'd invite mine too, right? The executives kept asking. I kept deflecting. My therapist, Dr. Winters, was watching me deteriorate in real time. Our sessions had increased to twice a week. She'd started each one by asking if I'd eaten that day. Often the answer was no. The stress had killed my appetite. I'd lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks. My clothes hung loose, which actually pleased my mother. She'd commented that I looked healthier, more disciplined. Finally taking care of myself. 1 month before IPO, I had to do a practice interview with CNBC. They'd ask about my background, my journey, the challenges I'd faced as a female founder. I made it through 3 questions before having a panic attack. Full-blown, couldn't breathe, room-spinning panic. The media trainer called 911. I convinced the paramedics I was fine, just overwhelmed. The PR team rescheduled, attributing it to exhaustion. The Forbes photo shoot was scheduled for 2 weeks before IPO. They wanted to shoot in my actual home show, The Real Priscilla. I redirected them to the office instead. My home was too personal, I said. Really, I just couldn't explain why a struggling freelancer lived in a penthouse with Central Park views. The final board meeting before the public announcement was surreal. We reviewed the numbers one last time: revenue projections, market analysis, growth strategies. Everything was perfect, too perfect to hide anymore. The board members who'd become mentors and friends congratulated me on the journey. One of them, Sandra Williams, pulled me aside after. She said she'd noticed I never mentioned family during our celebrations. She'd been there once, she said. Family that didn't understand, didn't support. She told me success was sweeter when you chose who to share it with. I almost broke down in her arms. 3 days before the announcement, my family held their pre-intervention dinner. I sat at the same mahogany table where my achievements had been dismissed for decades. My mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, trying to soften what was coming. My father cleared his throat multiple times, building up to his speech. Marcus kept checking his phone, probably reviewing his talking points. Jennifer held my hand and told me everything would be okay once I accepted help. They'd invited Aunt Margaret and her husband. Uncle Robert was there too, the one who'd made his money in real estate. Even cousin Brad had driven up from Philadelphia. Everyone who'd watched me fail for 8 years had gathered to save me from myself. My father stood up finally. He talked about potential, about the Harrison name, about how it wasn't too late to course correct. 35 was young enough to start over. He'd pulled strings, he said. Got me an interview at his old bank. Entry level, but with room to grow. In 10 years, maybe I could be where Marcus was now. My mother cried. Actually cried. She said she blamed herself. Maybe she'd pushed too hard. Maybe she hadn't pushed enough. But they loved me, she said. Despite everything, despite my failures, they loved me and wanted to help. Despite everything, despite my failures. The words echoed in my skull. Marcus presented a financial plan he'd created. If I moved home, stopped wasting money on rent, took the bank job and followed his investment advice, I could be financially stable by 40. He'd run the numbers 3 times to be sure. Jennifer had brought brochures, life coaching, career counseling, even a dating service for professional women over 30. She'd prepaid for 3 months of each her gift to help me restart. They went around the table, each offering their version of help. Money, connections, advice, programs, plans, everything except actual belief in my ability to succeed on my own. When they finished, they all looked at me expectantly, waiting for tears, waiting for gratitude, waiting for me to finally admit I needed saving. I thanked them for their concern, told them I'd think about everything, asked for time to process. My mother hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. My father nodded approvingly, probably thinking tough love had finally worked. Marcus slipped another check into my pocket. Jennifer whispered that admitting you need help was the first step. I drove back to the city in my beat-up Honda, the one I kept just for these visits. Halfway across the Triborough Bridge, I pulled over and screamed until my throat was raw, screamed 8 years of frustration into the night sky. In 48 hours, they'd all know the truth. The next morning, I sat in hair and makeup at CNBC. The announcement would go live at market open. In 24 hours, I wouldn't be their failure anymore. I'd be the woman who'd built a billion-dollar empire while they'd been planning interventions. The makeup artist asked if I was nervous. Everyone gets nervous before their first big interview, she said. She had no idea this wasn't about the interview. This was about destroying 8 years of carefully constructed lies with a single ring of the opening bell. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my penthouse watching the city lights, knowing everything was about to change. My phone showed 43 unread messages in the family group chat. They were following up on the intervention, making sure I was considering their offers. Making sure I knew they were there for me despite everything. Despite everything. In 12 hours, those words would have a very different meaning. The morning of March 15th started at 4:30 in the morning. I stood in my penthouse bathroom staring at my reflection. Today, Priscilla Harrison, the family failure, would cease to exist. In her place would stand Priscilla Harrison, youngest self-made female billionaire in logistics technology. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my head of PR. The press embargo lifted at market open 9:30 Eastern. Every major outlet had the story ready to publish. The Wall Street Journal's headline was already loaded. Mystery Tech CEO finally reveals herself. CNBC had promoted my interview across all their platforms. Bloomberg had a breaking news alert ready to send to millions of phones. I arrived at the New York Stock Exchange at 7. The building's marble facade gleamed in the morning sun. Inside, the energy was electric. My entire executive team was there wearing matching NeuralFlow t-shirts under their suits. Employees had flown in from around the world. The trading floor was packed with media traders and exchange officials. The NYSE president walked me through the bell-ringing ceremony. At exactly 9:30, I'd stand on the podium surrounded by my team and ring the bell that would take my company public. Cameras from every major network would broadcast it live. My face would be on screens from Manhattan to Hong Kong. At 9:15, I turned off my phone. The family group chat could wait. At 9:25, I climbed the narrow stairs to the bell podium. The crowd below looked up, anticipating. The countdown began on the digital displays. 10, 9, 8. My heart pounded. 3, 2, 1. I rang the opening bell. The sound echoed through the building as confetti cannons exploded. The crowd erupted in applause. The digital boards lit up with NFLWR stock symbol. The initial price was $42 per share, valuing the company at $1.2 billion. Within minutes, it jumped to 48. The CNBC interview happened immediately after. I sat in their temporary studio on the trading floor, trying to stay composed as the anchor introduced me as the newest member of the Billionaires Club. Behind us, traders were already buying and selling shares of my company. The interview went perfectly. I talked about innovation disruption solving real-world problems. I didn't mention my family once. By 10:30, my phone had 500 notifications. I turned it back on to find the family group chat in absolute chaos. Marcus had been at his desk at Goldman Sachs when the Bloomberg terminal flashed the news. His colleague had actually called him over saying, "Isn't this your sister's name?" That can't be right. Marcus had stared at the screen showing my face next to a $1 billion valuation and literally dropped his coffee. It shattered on the marble floor, causing enough commotion that half the trading floor looked over. My mother had been at her Pilates class when her phone started exploding. Her country club friends were sending linked screenshots, confused messages. "Dorothy, is this your Priscilla?" The instructor had to stop the class because my mother had collapsed onto her reformer, hyperventilating. They thought she was having a heart attack. She was having a reality attack. My father had been on the golf course with 3 former colleagues from Chase. One of them had received the Wall Street Journal alert and read it out loud. "Richard, didn't your daughter just take a company public? The one you said was struggling." My father had to sit down on the ninth hole bench. His friends thought he'd had a stroke. He'd had a stroke of recognition that his daughter wasn't who he thought she was. Jennifer had been at her son's private school for a parent-teacher conference when another mother showed her the Forbes article on her phone. The headline read, "Priscilla Harrison, the $1 billion secret." Jennifer had excused herself to the bathroom and vomited. The teacher found her crying on the bathroom floor, clutching her phone, whispering, "This can't be real," over and over. The family group chat was a digital explosion of confusion, disbelief, and anger. "Marcus, is this real? This has to be a mistake. Mother, I don't understand. Priscilla. What is this, father? Someone please explain what's happening." Jennifer. "How could you lie to us, Marcus? I'm looking at Bloomberg. It says you're worth 0.2 billion. Billion. Mother. There must be another Priscilla Harrison." Jennifer. "It's her face." "Mom, it's literally her face on CNBC right now." Father. "Why would you hide this, Marcus? My entire floor is asking me about you." I didn't know what to say. Mother. "You made us look like fools." The messages kept coming. Extended family members were reaching out. Aunt Margaret had seen it on the news at her grocery store. She'd actually fainted. A customer had to call an ambulance. Cousin Brad was in a meeting when his boss asked if he was related to the Neuralflow CEO. He'd said yes proudly, then realized he'd spent years trying to set me up with mediocre accountants. Uncle Robert sent a single text, "I offered you a receptionist job." The local Connecticut news had already picked up the story. Westport native becomes billionaire in secret. They'd interviewed people at my mother's country club. The commentary was brutal. Everyone had a story about poor Priscilla Harrison, who couldn't get her life together. The irony was delicious for the media. The failure who'd fooled everyone. By noon, I had 300 text messages, 600 emails, and 50 voicemails. Friends from high school who'd never kept in touch. College classmates who'd ignored my LinkedIn requests. Every single person who'd ever known me was reaching out. Most wanted to know how. Some wanted to know why. A few just wanted money. Marcus called 17 times before I answered. His voice was hollow. 8 years, he said. 8 years of lies. Do you know what this looks like? Do you know what people are saying? That I didn't know my own sister was a billionaire. That we're either stupid or cruel. Which is it, Priscilla? Are we stupid or are we cruel? Both, I wanted to say. You're both. My mother's voicemail was 20 minutes long. She cycled through every emotion: confusion, hurt, anger, back to confusion. She kept saying she didn't understand. How could I do this to them? How could I let them worry? How could I accept their charity when I had millions? How could I sit at their table and pretend to be grateful for their pity? My father sent a single text. "Come home. Now." Jennifer created a separate chat with just the siblings. Her messages were pure rage. She'd defended me, she said. She'd stood up for me when their friends called me a loser. She'd spent years feeling guilty for having more. She'd cried actual tears worrying about my future. And it was all a lie. All of it. The media requests were relentless. Everyone wanted the exclusive on why I'd hidden my success. The family angle was irresistible. Billionaire hides fortune from family who thought she was a failure. It was Shakespeare meets Silicon Valley. The publicists I'd hired to manage the IPO were overwhelmed. They kept asking for a statement about my family. I kept refusing. By evening, Neuralflow's stock had climbed to $56 per share. My net worth had increased by $200 million, while my family processed their shock. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was getting richer by the hour while they grappled with the wealth I'd already hidden. The country club had called my mother. The president wanted to offer me an honorary membership. The same club where she'd endured years of pity about her unsuccessful daughter. She'd hung up on him. Marcus's boss at Goldman Sachs had called him into his office. Why hadn't Marcus mentioned his sister was a major client prospect? They could have been managing Neuralflow's accounts. Marcus had to admit he didn't know his own sister ran the company. The humiliation was crushing for someone who'd built his identity on being the successful sibling. Jennifer's husband had realized their hospital's revolutionary logistics system was MedFlow, my company, the company that had saved them millions and improved patient outcomes. He'd been praising it at medical conferences for a year, not knowing his sister-in-law had built it. That night, I sat in my penthouse watching the city lights reading the messages pour in. 8 years of careful construction had detonated in 12 hours. The family that had mourned my failure was now mourning their ignorance. The question wasn't whether to face them, but how. My phone rang. Dr. Winters, my therapist. She'd seen the news. She asked how I was feeling. For the first time in 8 years, I told someone the complete truth. I felt free. 3 days after the IPO, I drove to Connecticut in my Tesla. Not the beat-up Honda they expected, but the custom Model S Plaid I'd bought myself after closing my first major deal. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the Colonial where I'd been deemed the family disappointment for 8 years. My mother was watching from the window. I saw the curtain move as I parked. She'd see the car first, the one that cost more than most people's annual salary, the one with NFL W1 as the license plate. A little petty, perhaps, but I'd earned some pettiness. The door opened before I knocked. My father stood there looking older than I remembered. He'd aged years in 3 days. Behind him, my mother clutched a tissue. She'd been crying. Her makeup, usually perfect, was smeared. The family portrait in the foyer behind them seemed to mock the moment. 4 children, all smiling, all equal in their parents' eyes. What a fiction that had been. The living room was set up like a tribunal. Marcus sat in father's leather chair. Jennifer perched on the sofa's edge. Their spouses were notably absent. This was family only, blood only. The people who'd supposedly loved me unconditionally while setting conditions on everything. I sat in the same chair where they'd held the intervention 2 weeks earlier. The irony was sharp enough to cut. My father spoke first. His voice was controlled the way it got during his most serious business negotiations. "Explain," he said. "Make us understand why you would do this to your family. To my family." The words triggered something. 8 years of suppressed rage bubbled up like lava. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I'd kept everything. Every dismissive comment, every pitying look transcribed. Every moment they'd made me feel worthless. I started reading. Thanksgiving 2018, Mom told Aunt Margaret that at least she had 3 successful children. 3 out of 4 wasn't bad. Christmas 2019, Marcus said in front of everyone that not everyone was meant for greatness. Some people were meant to be ordinary, while looking directly at me. Easter 2020. Jennifer suggested I consider marrying for financial security since career wasn't working out. Father's birthday 2021. Dad told his golf buddy on speakerphone that his youngest was still finding herself code for failing. The list went on, date after date, quote after quote. 8 years of casual cruelty documented with obsessive precision. By the time I finished, 20 minutes had passed. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet crying. I told them about that first Thanksgiving when I decided to stay quiet. How I'd had $10 million in signed contracts, but couldn't share it because Marcus had already decided I needed his charity. How every achievement after was tainted by their predetermined narrative of my failure. I described building neural flow during 18-hour days while they thought I was unemployed. The venture capital raises I couldn't celebrate. The acquisition offers I couldn't discuss. The press coverage I had to hide. The famous people who knew my name while my family thought I was nobody. I told them about the studio apartment in Queens maintained just for their visits while I lived in luxury they couldn't imagine. The beat-up Honda parked in a garage next to my Tesla and Porsche. The designer clothes hidden in storage so I could wear Target to family dinners. The physical toll came next. The ulcers, the anxiety medication, the therapy sessions where Dr. Winters helped me process the trauma of voluntary invisibility. The nights I'd cried myself to sleep successful, but entirely alone with that success. Marcus interrupted. His face was red, voice shaking. "You're saying this is our fault. You lied for 8 years and it's our fault." I looked at him directly. "Remember when you gave me $300 at Thanksgiving? You counted it out, bill by bill, making sure everyone saw your generosity. I just closed a $10 million deal. But you'd already decided I was a charity case. How could I tell you the truth after that performance? Jennifer was crying now too. But we worried about you," she said. "We spent years worried sick. Worried I laughed, but it was bitter. You were embarrassed. There's a difference. You worried about what to tell your friends. You worried about the Harrison reputation. You never once worried about whether I was happy, just whether I was successful by your definition." My father stood up, pacing now. "You had no right to deceive us like this. We're your family." Family, I stood too, matching his energy. Family doesn't assign you the role of failure and refuse to let you audition for anything else. Family doesn't plan interventions for someone who doesn't need intervening. Family believes in you enough to see you change. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was small, broken. "We love you." "Conditionally," I said. "You love me conditionally." And the conditions were impossible because you'd already decided I couldn't meet them. The room erupted, everyone talking at once, denials, accusations, justifications. Marcus insisting he'd only wanted to help. Jennifer claiming she'd been supportive. My parents maintaining they'd done everything right. I let them spiral for a moment, then pulled out a folder I'd brought. Inside were printed emails, text messages, group chats. Their own words about me captured and cataloged. The gossip with extended family. The jokes at my expense. The plans to fix me that assumed I was broken. I also pulled out another folder. This one contained every major media mention of my success over the past 3 years. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Bloomberg. Hundreds of articles about the mysterious CEO changing logistics technology. The innovation saving companies millions. The partnerships with Fortune 500 companies. All of it attributed to someone they'd written off. You want to know why I hid this? I spread the papers across the coffee table. Because you'd already decided who I was. The family failure, the cautionary tale, the one who needed saving. Every single one of these achievements would have been diminished by your surprise that I could achieve them. Marcus picked up a Bloomberg article about Neuralflow's partnership with Amazon. His hands shook. "This is you. All of this is you." While you were getting your promotion to managing director, I was building the infrastructure that makes your bank's supply chain function. While Jennifer was posting about her perfect life, I was saving lives by optimizing medical supply delivery to ICUs. While Mom was crying to her friends about her unsuccessful daughter, I was becoming one of the most powerful women in tech. My father sat down heavily. The weight of it all was crushing his worldview. His rigid hierarchy of success, where he and Marcus sat at the top, had been shattered by the daughter he'd pitied. Jennifer was scrolling through her phone, finding all the articles she'd missed. Her face went white when she found the Forbes feature calling me the future of logistics technology. She'd shared this article in the family chat a year ago, not knowing it was about me. The silence stretched until my mother asked the question that really mattered. "Can you ever forgive us?" I thought about that. Forgiveness, such a simple word for such a complex process. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know we can't move forward with lies anymore. Mine or yours." Marcus's defensiveness flared again. "The lie that you're supportive, the lie that you celebrate each other, The lie that this family loves unconditionally. The lie that success is measured only in traditional careers and conventional paths. The lie that you knew me at all. My father's business brain was processing the implications, the contracts, the valuations, the connections. His daughter had access to people he'd spent a career trying to reach. The irony was eating him alive. "What happens now?" Jennifer asked. "Now," I said, standing to leave. "You decide whether you want to know your actual sister or keep mourning the fictional failure you created. I'll be at the St. Regis in town. You have 48 hours to decide." I walked out of my childhood home, leaving them surrounded by evidence of their blindness. The articles, the messages, the proof that they'd been living with a stranger they'd invented while the real me built an empire. The drive to the hotel was liberating. 8 years of performance had ended. The mask was off. They could either accept the real Priscilla or lose her entirely. For the first time in almost a decade, the choice wasn't mine to make. The 48 hours I gave my family stretched like an eternity. I stayed at the St. Regis, the luxury hotel in Westport, where my parents had celebrated their anniversaries but never imagined their failure daughter could afford. The irony wasn't lost on me as I checked into the penthouse suite. The first 24 hours were silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts at contact. I wondered if they'd chosen pride over reconciliation. Then Jennifer broke the silence with a simple text. "Can we talk?" Just us. She came to my suite that evening. For the first time in our lives, I saw my sister look uncertain. She sat on the elegant sofa, her usual perfect posture crumpled. She started crying before speaking. She told me about the past 2 days, how she'd gone through every message she'd sent about me, every photo where I stood slightly apart, every family gathering where she'd noticed I seemed distant, but attributed it to failure rather than exhaustion from hiding success. She'd realized she'd never really asked about my work, just assumed it wasn't worth discussing. Her husband had shown her MedFlow's impact reports from his hospital. 20% reduction in critical medication delays. 30 lives saved in the past quarter alone from faster delivery of emergency supplies. Her sister-in-law had built the system saving lives at her husband's workplace, and she'd been trying to set me up with divorced accountants. "I have to know," she said. "When I had my miscarriage 4 years ago, and you were the only one who really showed up. Was that real? Or was that part of the act that was real?" I told her. That was the most real I'd been in years. She sobbed then, really sobbed, because she realized I'd been capable of being authentic in her moment of pain, while she'd never given me the space to be authentic in my moments of triumph. Marcus came next. He brought a bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon, the same kind they'd opened for his promotion to managing director. He poured 2 glasses and made a toast. "To the actual winner in the family," he said, with a rueful smile. He told me about the humiliation at Goldman Sachs, how his colleagues had been shocked he didn't know about my company, how his boss had questioned his judgment, his awareness, his ability to identify opportunities. The golden boy image he'd cultivated was tarnished because he'd been too arrogant to see his sister's brilliance. But beyond the professional embarrassment, he was grappling with something deeper. He'd built his identity on being the successful sibling, the one who'd made it, the one others should aspire to be. Now he realized he'd been competing in a race I'd already won while running backward in designer heels. "Do you know what the worst part is?" he asked. "I actually gave you job hunting advice last year. I told you to consider entry-level positions to get your foot in the door. You were running 3 companies, and I was giving you entry-level advice." The absurdity of it made us both laugh, the first genuine laugh we'd shared in years. My parents came together on the second day. They looked older, fragile, in a way I'd never seen. My mother brought photo albums. My father brought printed emails from colleagues congratulating him on his successful daughter, the same colleagues he'd apologized to about me for years. We went through the photos, every family gathering, every holiday, every milestone. My mother pointed out how my smile had changed over the years, bright and genuine in early photos, then increasingly forced, finally settling into a polite mask. She'd thought I was depressed about my failures. She'd never considered I was exhausted from hiding my successes. My father, ever the businessman, had done research. He'd read every article about my companies, watched every interview he could find, studied the technology I developed. He understood now the scope of what I'd built. More importantly, he understood it was beyond anything he'd achieved in his traditional corporate career. "I need you to understand something," he said. "I was raised to believe success looked one way: corner office, corporate ladder, traditional path. You didn't just succeed differently, you succeeded in a way that made my entire framework obsolete. It's not an excuse, but it's an explanation." My mother held my hand. "The Harrison family Christmas photo this year had 3 children and a space where you should have been. I told everyone you were traveling for work." Another lie to cover the lies. "I'm tired of lies, Priscilla. I want my daughter back. My actual daughter." The conversations weren't easy. There were tears, anger, long silences, but also, for the first time in 8 years, honesty. Real, raw, painful honesty. Marcus admitted his resentment that I'd achieved more, while he'd gotten all the parental praise. Jennifer confessed she'd been jealous of what she saw as my freedom from expectations, not realizing I'd been crushed by them. My parents acknowledged they'd created a hierarchy where only certain achievements mattered, forcing me to succeed in exile rather than in celebration. 6 months have passed since that revelation. The family dynamics have shifted in ways both subtle and profound. We're in therapy, all of us separately and together. Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, calls us a case study in achievement trauma and conditional love patterns. The country club my mother frequents has become a different experience for her. She's gone from the woman with the struggling daughter to the mother of the billionaire. But she's learning that neither identity should have defined her worth as a parent. She started telling people she's proud of all her children, then actually listening when they ask about each of us. My father has become obsessed with understanding technology and entrepreneurship. He reads every book, watches every documentary, attends startup events in the city. Not to control or direct, but to understand the world I inhabit. Last week, he sent me an article about supply chain innovation with a note. "Thought you might find this interesting." No advice, no criticism, just sharing. Marcus and I have developed an unexpected partnership. He's helped me understand traditional finance structures, while I've introduced him to the innovation economy. He's even considering leaving Goldman Sachs to join a fintech startup. The golden boy considering abandoning his golden cage because his failure sister showed him cages come in many forms. Jennifer and I have found our way back to genuine sisterhood, not the performed kind we had before, where she was the perfect one and I was the project. Real sisterhood, where we both have strengths and struggles. She started sharing her own pressures, the exhaustion of perfection, the loneliness of living up to expectations. We talk now, really talk sometimes, until 3 in the morning. The extended family has been more complicated. Aunt Margaret still runs her grocery stores, but has stopped offering unsolicited life advice to anyone. Cousin Brad tried to pitch me 17 business ideas before I told him I don't invest in family. Uncle Robert pretends he always knew I'd make it big, rewriting history to save face. I let him. Some battles aren't worth fighting. I've moved some of my operations to Connecticut, opening a satellite office in Stamford. Not to be closer to family, but to stop hiding from my origins. The commute from Manhattan is easy, and it's brought unexpected benefits. I've hired some of my high school classmates who'd struggled to find opportunity in our affluent but insular community. They're brilliant people who just needed someone to see their potential. The family dinners have resumed, but they're different now. We sit at the same mahogany table, but the dynamics have shifted. Success isn't ranked. Achievements aren't compared. Everyone speaks. Everyone listens. It's not perfect. We sometimes fall into old patterns. My mother occasionally slips into comparison mode. My father reverts to corporate speak. But we catch ourselves now. We correct course. I've started bringing my real life to these dinners. Stories from board meetings, challenges with scaling, the stress of managing hundreds of employees. My family listens now with genuine interest rather than polite concern. They ask questions to understand, not to fix. They celebrate my wins without surprise, acknowledge my struggles without pity. The money aspect has been delicate. I've set up education funds for Jennifer's children, but with clear boundaries. I've advised Marcus on investments but won't fund his ventures. I've helped my parents with retirement planning but won't subsidize their lifestyle. Wealth revealed has to be managed as carefully as wealth hidden. Dating has become possible again. I met someone 6 months ago, Andrew. A surgeon, ironically, though not through Jennifer's matchmaking. He knows my whole story. The success, the hiding, the family drama. He finds it fascinating rather than off-putting. He came to dinner last week. My family was genuinely welcoming rather than desperately grateful someone was willing to date their failure daughter. The company continues to grow. We're acquiring our fourth company next month. The valuation has reached $2 billion. The Wall Street Journal is doing a follow-up story on the CEO who hid her success. This time I'm including my family in the narrative, the real narrative, the complicated, painful, ultimately redemptive truth of conditional love, and the price of proving yourself to people who should have believed in you from the start. My therapist, Dr. Winters, says I've integrated my split selves. The failure and the success were both performances. Now I'm just Priscilla, successful in some ways, still growing in others, loved hopefully for all of it rather than despite it. Last week, my mother called with gossip from the country club. Mrs. Whitman was bragging about her son's promotion. Mom laughed and said she'd responded that all children develop at their own pace. Some just take unconventional paths to extraordinary places. She meant it about me, but also about herself. We're all still developing, still growing, still learning what unconditional love actually looks like. The empire I built in secret is now public. Forbes updates my net worth quarterly. CNBC calls for comments on market trends. The Wall Street Journal features my insights on supply chain innovation. But the real success isn't the money or recognition. It's sitting at that mahogany dining table, no longer performing, no longer hiding, just being myself with people who are learning finally to see me. The transformation isn't complete. Maybe it never will be. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. There are still moments of tension, references to the lost years, awkward silences when someone mentions the time before. But we're moving forward, together this time with truth instead of pretense. I think about that 26-year-old me sitting at Thanksgiving making the decision to hide. She thought silence would protect her from pain. Instead, it created a different kind of suffering. 8 years of voluntary invisibility. 8 years of being unseen by the people who claim to love her most. But maybe it had to happen this way. Maybe I needed to build my empire without their voices in my head telling me I couldn't. Maybe they needed to confront their own biases without me softening the blow. Maybe we all needed to break before we could rebuild. The lesson isn't simple. It's not just about believing in yourself when others don't. It's not just about family accepting success in different forms. It's about the complex intersection of love, expectation, achievement, and identity. It's about the price we pay for others' approval and the price they pay for withholding it. Money built my empire, but honesty rebuilt my family. The empire was easier. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've ever felt unseen by those who should see you, most clearly know that your worth isn't determined by their vision. You are not required to shrink yourself to fit others' expectations, even when those others share your DNA. What about you? Have you ever hidden your light to avoid making others uncomfortable? Have you ever succeeded in spite of, rather than because of your family's faith in you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please, if this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the complex realities behind success. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their achievements are valid, even if their family doesn't understand them yet. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You just need the courage to be yourself fully and unapologetically. Until next time, this is Priscilla reminding you that the most powerful empire you can build is the one where you no longer need to hide who you really are.